able to tell this story of why you do and how you ended up doing what you do in a compelling way, I think can change your business.
Yeah, you opened this video because you are ready to boost your business, to boost your influence, and to boost your impact through storytelling. Let's get rolling.
I'm Margot Leitman. I'm an award-winning storyteller, best-selling author, public speaker, story coach. I work in the full-time in the world of storytelling and helping others to share their stories around the world. And I've been doing this for about 12 years now, full-time.
Wow. Wow, that's a long time. An award-winning storyteller. That sounds so fascinating. What does that mean?
I've won a number of storytelling competitions, and then I won the Grand Slam, which is like where all of the winners compete against each other for the Moth storytelling, and scored the first perfect 10 in New York City. So pretty exciting.
Wow. Wow, that's really exciting. That's super cool. So you have probably a lot of cool content to share today. And I'm yeah, I trust them on that. Absolutely. And maybe we can even hear some compelling stories from you as a person like right now. But before we go into that, I'm very curious, like you were born and then now you're this award-winning storytelling. Like what shifted for you in your life that you started to be enthusiastic about this and also became better?
A lot shifted. I mean, in my whole 20s, I lived in New York City and I was pursuing other things. I have a degree in theater. So when I graduated college, I was very much working in that space, live theater or auditioning for TV and film and such, and had some successes in that department, worked mostly in comedic theater and comedic performing and stand up and such. And then eventually I felt like stand up didn't really I don't know, it didn't feel like the right match for me, but I also still wanted to get on stage and speak alone as myself. And then I started just telling full stories in my stand-up routine. And then eventually co-started a storytelling show with a friend. And then from there launched a whole world. So that was like at the very end of my 20s, I started telling stories on stage in my own storytelling show. And my life really changed after that. It was weird things that I had been waiting for them to sync up and happen started happening. Like someone would be an audience of a show and offer me a job to come to their company and teach them to tell stories, or someone would see me in a show and offer me to go, somewhere where they fly somewhere and perform. And it started to really take off. So I built a teaching practice because my survival job when I was an actor was a substitute teacher. So I had some teaching experience in that space. And I created a curriculum of how to teach people how to tell stories. And from there, published some books about it. And that's when it eventually, once my books came out on the subject, that was when my business model really took off. So yeah, it was like an evolution. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool to hear. And it's not like, like a study you did, like, I don't know if there's any storytelling education, I'm not so sure, but or in like in school. But what is really cool is that you step by step you just evolved, and this is now what you do, combined with all the talents and experience you had before. So that's
and all of what I thought were failures led to this, which is really interesting because some of the best stories I tell are the stories of those crazy times where I was really struggling, or some of and some of the connections I made during those times are what have brought me to today as well. So it's really interesting because you don't see it as, it's a good life lesson to think about, but it was very cumulative. It wasn't anything that I did. I think a lot of us wait for a big break, right? Like we're going to get that job, or we're going to meet the one, or whatever that big break for you is. And it's all cumulative, it all builds. And that was what was the best learning experience of all of this, was that nothing was overnight. And it did come to a head at a certain point that I had to decide between this weird unknown career in the field of storytelling and to continue on the path I was already on. And I went towards the storytelling, and it's been a really unique and unusual and sometimes unstable life choice, but I think it suits my personality personally.
Wow. It sounds unsure and at the same time very exciting because I do feel your enthusiasm about this subject through the video. So that's really
Well,
cool.
I think about this a lot. Like when I was in, I have a theater degree, right? So when you're in college and you're studying theater and you audition for the play, and then the cast list goes up the next day, and are you on it or are you not? And if you're not on it, what can you scramble into? Maybe you'll put up, I would like put up my own show if I didn't get in the main cast list, and it's that same feeling. It's like, oh my gosh, is this company going to hire me to teach this thing? No. Okay, well then I'm going to put together an online workshop independently and see what happens. So it's that entrepreneurial get up and go spirit that I've had to keep going, which I think is just very much in my nature. I don't know how much I'm a person that can really clock in and clock out of a normal world.
Yeah, I really emphasize or like resonate with that because I personally had like a 3 year of supermarket job where I got paid per hour, and that system was just for me so weird because when I do something, I like to do something really good, and I put all my energy and passion and personality in it. And like when you work harder, you don't get rewarded more, which is strange because you're putting more work in and you're creating more value for others. So I can resonate with that so much. And from that point, I also did like a lot of entrepreneurial, exciting and unsure situations. But it's what fuels your heart, and it's at least what I feel when I listen to you talking. And you said you're just going to the storytelling journey. And what is storytelling for you, really? Like if you would say what the definition would be.
It started out as telling a true autobiographical story on stage. That's how it began for me. And I do think at the end of the day, telling a story is just understanding the concept of how to tell something in a concise and an effective manner with a beginning, middle, and an end that moves people and affects people, and telling something from the heart that has affected and moved you in some way. And hopefully through that, you connect with audiences. So that's how it initially started, as a theatrical experience. But now I see that you can do that with your sneaker brand, or that you can do that with your homeless outreach, or you can do that on a date, and then you start to see how much the value of being able to tell a story properly, tell the story of a brand, tell the story of your client that's taking the stand in court. These are all types of clients I work with now independently. So, it became eventually, with the more, I've written 3 books on the subject now, being deemed quote unquote an expert in the subject, you start working with all different types of people that realize, like, wait a minute, there's a value in me being able to tell a story. And I need to learn that properly. So it really expanded from just telling a story on stage to entertain a crowd. And it went places I never dreamed it would.
Yeah. What would be like a place that you're talking about that was like a really cool dream of yours?
Well, I didn't even know it was a dream, but a few years ago, I get emotional thinking about it. I stood on stage in Mumbai, India, in front of, it was about 2,000 people, telling a story, and had been flown out there as a part of a spoken word festival. And I just remember standing on this stage and being like, I never in a million years thought starting that little storytelling show in the Lower East Side would lead me to the other end of the world, telling a story in front of 2,000 people who, and I remember that feeling, being this, like, thinking, wow, this is bigger than I thought it was. Like, I didn't even know about, I don't know about storytelling communities all over the world. I try to know my best, but there's no way for me to know exactly what's going on all over the world. But when I got to Mumbai and realized how big the community of storytellers were there, I was overwhelmed with emotion. And I thought, my gosh, I haven't even cracked the surface of this. This is all over the world. So then the world shuts down, and you can't travel anywhere. And then I start teaching workshops online. And I started getting people, whereas before, because I live in California, I would teach in person and I would have people from California in my class. And then I would fly to New York and I'd have people from New York in my class. But then I started teaching online and I would ask, where is everyone? Oh, I'm from Portugal. I'm from Australia. It's 3 a.m. here. It's 1 a.m. here. I'm in France and all of these things. And then I started connecting with people all over the world, all over again. And there was something really beautiful about that, amidst the world being shut down, which was really sucked. I'm not
You
going to
finally found out.
Yeah.
You finally found out that was all possible, and then it was not possible anymore. But what I like about what you're just saying is like your personal business story, yeah? Because I know like right now there's a lot of people listening to this interview that are also so enthusiastic about their own business, like what you are telling us right now, and that you are using storytelling as a way of getting out it with business, but probably you're also using it to utilize it in a way that's compelling for others for your business.
Yeah.
And how do you apply that? Because that is actually what other people can use too, because you can be so enthusiastic about your business yourself, and it can be so cool, just what you said with the brands. But in a way, when do you really get impact, or when can you really change someone else with the stuff that you can do, is when they believe you can do it. And how do you create that? By communicating. So how did you utilize your own talent, that was actually the stuff that you teach, to showcase your own brand, basically?
Well, I often get asked, and I think that this is an important thing that everyone should have the story of, which is that how did you start doing what you do? And to have the origin story of why you do what you do, which includes the vulnerability, which includes struggle, which includes self-doubt, which is very hard for people to put out there. But to be able to tell this story of why you do and how you ended up doing what you do in a compelling way, I think can change your business. So and that is a story I tell very frequently in long speeches. I talk a lot about how I was doing stand-up comedy. I was signed by a comedy manager for the first time. I was so excited. And we sat down to lunch and I said, I think I want to switch gears and tell stories. And he said, well, that's not a job. And I said, well, that's really what I want to do. And he said, I don't think you can do that. So can you just do stand-up comedy? And then I ordered the most expensive meal on the menu. I let them pay. And then I vowed that I would make it my job. And I did. And so I think about that. And I tell that story very frequently because it's like really, it's true. And it's from the heart, but it also shows you how I started doing what I'm doing. And I think about all of these people, like the story of Oprah, or the story of Michael Phelps, or the story, I mean, these are American big stars, but I think they're big enough that everyone knows who they are. Absolutely. That incorporate their struggle and their triumphs over that into their brand and build something from that. And I think that those are people that we really tap into and relate to, are people that have incorporated their own personal story and made that part of their brand. And I think that that is really unbelievably amazing.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So what I hear you say is basically you are your brand. Like you have a personal story to tell, your vulnerable story about how you created this business and why you are helping these people. And that story is actually very effective to pitch your business. Is that right?
Yeah. So there was one time I was giving a speech to a company that I'll keep anonymous, but they, in the speech that we were talking, realized that why they weren't connecting was that they were telling the story, their origin story of their brand, but there was no person that you could tap into. There was no human, right? So then they were talking about this business fought against this business, and then we came, and I said, well, who are the people behind that? Is there a person you can tap into? And I think that we need to remember that audiences often don't tap into fact, they tap into personal story. And so if there's a person that they can see themselves in the story that you're telling of your brand, then you can really connect. So often when we talk about big things, let's say I started my whatever, my tree business because I thought there weren't enough trees in Nevada. And that's really, really hard. Or it's like, I went to visit my grandmother. She had one tree, that tree was dying. And my grandmother always loved trees, but there wasn't enough opportunity to plant them around here. And I think of her with every tree I plant as a different way of telling that story, but you can see a person and you can connect with it. I mean, I can tell a better story that's prepared. That was off the cuff and not a real story. But you see, my point is that people talk in abstracts, but when we talk about human to human relations, that's when people connect. So that's what you really need to think about in telling the story of your brand or your company.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I personally resonated with so much also because of my personal learning preference. Like me as a person, I'm very outgoing, I'm very visual, so I really like to see stuff happening in front of me, and you have to take me on this journey, and when I'm get really engaged, you will see it on my face. And at the same time, I also know some people that are more factual, like they want to get the facts. Like, and if you are working with a person like that who also is very passionate about telling all the facts and telling all the structures, what would you say to them?
I work with people like that all the time. And you really have to think about what are things that I ask them, like, broad audiences retain the facts along with a story. So if you're going to say, I don't know what, if there's a numerical fact I can retain, like right now, like abortion in America is a hot topic. And then you could retain, 1 in blank women have had an abortion. And I don't even remember what the statistic is, right? But I do remember the story of Gloria Steinem talking about the abortion that she had, as a young woman. She tells that story very well. So it's like, you can tell this numerical fact with it, but you can also attach a story to that. And therefore they will retain, at the very least, the point you're trying to get across with the fact. There are a lot of people that lead with fact. And I do think that even in giving those facts, you still have to attach stories. Steve Jobs was very, very good at that. He gave us a lot of facts, a lot of, high tech talk, but he did it in a way that was very story oriented and conversational. I always encourage people to watch his launches because that's why people like me who have no interest in technology whatsoever would watch them, because he told stories. So thinking about it in those terms, what story can you attach to this fact so people will retain it, is the way I look at it.
Yeah, really cool. Really cool. And I think it's always good to give arguments to every single person or with a different learning preference, because I know there are people out there who are already very engaging with stories and sometimes are a bit bored with the facts. And I know that there's a lot of people also out there that love the facts and the structure and to be correct. And they have this beliefs of like, but I want to inform them the best I can. So I want to put everything out there that I know. But what I really like about what you're saying is basically like, that's how our brain works, right? Like we connect with stories. And if you really want to engage with them in a higher level and really want to inform them, you first have to make them open for your information. And that's how you do it with stories. So I really love that. And that it also invites, all kind of people to go with storytelling, because it's such a cool trick that if you know it, it can help your brand, but it will also, and I tell this from a personal perspective, also uplift your relationships, because you're just becoming a compelling storyteller that engages with people more, and then you can communicate with all kinds of people.
Absolutely. I mean, people joke that I have a lot of reviews that say, which I shouldn't be looking at my book reviews, but sometimes I do. And a lot of them online say, wow, my date went so much better. So there's a lot of people that are like, wow, I got so much better at dating from reading this, which was not something I anticipated. So, there's that too.
Yeah. I completely agree. Like it's a skill for life, right? It's a skill that you can apply for business, but basically it's a skill for life and that you can apply whenever you need it. Like another day I had this conversation and he said, like on some point as a person, you will have to talk to people. Like if like if it's, for example, on a wedding, or if it's just you and the bus driver, like you just on some point need to talk to people. So better do it as in a compelling way. Yeah.
I mean,
Super
and there's
cool.
that in the positive. I've had kind of a challenging year this year, and I had two deaths in my life very close together, and found myself in a position where I had to speak at two funerals within the same month. And imagine, so then you're dealing with grief and sadness and emotion, and on top of that, having to tell a story and speak publicly. And I couldn't believe that because I had ease in telling stories, that I was able to do that, and do that with, and you may find, and that's a life situation I never intended on being with, that has nothing to do with my profession in any way. But you do, like you're saying, find yourself in positions. I have to speak at this wedding. I have to speak at this funeral. I have to give a toast at my boss's retirement dinner, whatever that is. And you find that it's not the most stressful thing in the world, which many people find it to be. But like for me, I was actually really happy that I wasn't so stressed about having to speak at these funerals, but more stressed about the loss, which was where my mind should have been. Usually people just focus on the speech. So yeah.
And then you're waiting for your time, and then you're not really listening to the previous talks.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but that's a beautiful example, and that's indeed, like, there's studies out there that people fear death more, or public speaking more than death, which is absolutely insane.
It is insane.
But
I mean, this is a thing that I tell people, is that if your speech or whatever it is you're doing goes well, then your day the next day is probably going to be pretty similar than it was the previous day. If your speech or story or whatever goes terribly, the next day is also going to be pretty much the same. Like your life is going to go on either way. And it's not like, had I spoken at those two funerals and it not gone well, I think people would have been like, well, all right.
yeah.
I mean, and it went well, and maybe people remember something I said, and that's really nice too. But my life is virtually the same. So I always say that it's like nobody's life is going to drastically get better if it goes well, or drastically get worse if it doesn't. So it's just let it be, just try to do your best and hope for the best.
I love that. And actually, and that is something I think that's very on a foundational level for a lot of people that are presenting themselves, like in what situation whatsoever, like if it's in a sales presentation, if it's on the street, if it's on a funeral, like the basics is basically the mindset, right? Like if you believe that the stuff that you're saying is valuable, or that that you don't need to be perfect in order to just do it, that's already like such a big step forward in the perfectly presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're on the right track with that thinking. I agree.
Yeah. And I'm curious, Margot, is like, we talk a lot about storytelling as an art right now. And I also want to make it a bit more practical for people listening. Like, what is the first step they can take? So if you're out there and you're very enthusiastic about your business, yet on some point it's not so compelling yet that people are dying to work with you, what would be a tip that you would give right now in order to help them to take that second step
in telling the story of their business? So I would say, figure out why you do what you do, and what is it that made you do what you do. And it can't be, and the way that most people tell that story is, I saw the ad online and I applied and now I do this. So, but how do you really end up doing what you're doing, and why do you do it? And what were the things you thought you would do along the way? And how did you end up in this position? And some of the most wonderful stories are the stories of people that thought they were going to do something else and ended up stumbling into something completely different. And how did they get there? So the story of why you do what you do and how you ended up doing it without talking about the job listing or what have you, but like the steps in life. I was in fashion school and I was failing and I was going to lose my loan. So I decided to switch majors. And what I decided the easiest thing to study would be English. It turned out I fell in love with it. And now I'm a teacher, but I'm the most fashionable teacher in the school, whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
That's a more compelling reason than to say, I went to school for English and now I'm a teacher, which is the way most people would tell that story, right? So you have to think about what are the steps that led you to this, the ups and downs. And so that's the main thing, is like, how did you end up doing what you're doing? How and why?
Okay, that's a really good one. And I know, like, I'm putting you on the spot every time, and I'm thinking about clients at this moment, like what would their objections be at this moment? And I have one guy that I'm helping out, and he is very terrified of telling his personal story. And not because he doesn't want to be vulnerable, but just because he thinks that some things are unnecessary for the audience to know. What is your view on that?
There are some things that are unnecessary for an audience to know. I mean, you don't have to tell the audience that's coming to invest in your sneaker brand how badly you were bullied in 3rd grade. I mean, no, you don't have to include, and you don't have to include things you're uncomfortable with, but you can include why you're passionate about this. It's up to you what you're comfortable with including. And if you're uncomfortable including a certain part of your narrative, the audience will sense that discomfort and be uncomfortable right along with you. So absolutely, I would encourage people that don't want to share certain parts of their lives to not, and keep them for themselves. That's totally fine. But what are you comfortable sharing along the way? I mean, there's many things that I have not shared with an audience, and I think that's completely fine. So your comfort, but if he's not willing to share any part of his story whatsoever, then just share, why are you passionate about what you do? And there's got to be something in there that an audience will connect with. But listen to your comfort levels, because there's something valuable in that as well. And I respect that in people very much.
Yeah, that's a great one. So if I would summarize it all together, you would say, find a person that people can relate to in your story and not completely full of facts, and find your personal balance in what works for you and what doesn't, but make sure you share something, because that's what people resonate with.
Absolutely. I mean, going back to someone like Michael Phelps, I imagine he's not the only Olympian with anxiety and mental health issues. I imagine, but I highly doubt that, right? But he's willing to talk about it. He's willing to put his name on a therapy brand. He's willing to really discuss his journey and make movies about it and try and be a spokesperson for this and help others with what they have going on in their brains and their minds and their thoughts. And that's what he's comfortable doing. Now, to ask that of every Olympian swimmer is ridiculous, right? But the fact that he's comfortable with it, let him do it. But that doesn't mean that this other swimmer can't tell the story of how their grandpa was a terrible swimmer and drowned in a lake. And now that they're in, now that inspired them to learn how to be the best swimmer ever. They can tell that story, or whatever that is, they can tell something else that makes them feel comfortable. So you have to think about it that it's like, not everybody's comfort levels are the same, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great tip. And what I want to add on that is, at least also what I think about, is like, every story is unique. Like what you say, like probably a lot of athletes are coping with this problem, but yet everyone resonates with someone else, because we're all different, right?
Absolutely.
So that's really cool. And I'm looking at the time, Margot, and at the people with these busy calendars. So I want to finish with one last thing. And I want, because you are a storytelling expert. And I know you told already in this interview, you have some books that you wrote. Do you mind telling about one of your books, where the audience can find it? And do you want to tell that in such a compelling way that people want it?
Okay.
And then it could be a great example as well.
Okay. So I have 3 books on the subject. This is my first book, Gawky Tales of an Extra Long Awkward Phase. This was my memoir that I was the biggest struggle ever to get published. And eventually my agent called and said that no one was going to publish it. I had to give up. And then a week later, she called me and said, actually, a publisher changed their mind. Never mind, you're going to be an author. So don't give up when you're trying to write. So it was incredibly challenging to get this first book published, but I'm so glad because this is some of my funniest stories from the stage. From there, I published Long Story Short, The Only Storytelling Guide You'll Ever Need, which is my best-selling book, which is the one most people know me for. And I was able to put all of my lesson plans into this. So it's like taking a class with me, but you're just taking it for $19.95. So there you go. That's a lot cheaper than anything. And then a lot of my students asked for prompts because they love writing prompts that I give them. So I decided to publish a book about them. What's your story? A workbook for the storyteller and all of us, filled with prompts, lists, and also like amazing art and graphics done by my fabulous graphic designer, Joyce Wang, who I've worked with on two out of 3 of my books, and I hope to work with her quite a bit. So shout out to her. I think that's it.
Crazy. Awesome. Thank you so much. And if it's not your tips, if it's not the books, if it's not everything people take from me from this interview, then please let it be your authentic way you come across, because I don't feel that you pretend to be someone else, or that you create this cool background, or you're just sitting there like yourself. And I feel that I just talk to you like I'm sitting in a bar, and I think that's the best ever way to tell your story.
That's good. You felt that way. It's
thank you so much for
the morning here. So I'm glad you don't think, I'm glad I gave the impression like you're sitting at a bar with me at 8 a.m. my time, because that's a real compliment. Because I've had no alcohol.
That's a real compliment.
Just coffee. So
no, that's amazing. And that's the beauty of our time difference and joining online, right? So
absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See, and there you go. Commitment over convenience. You finished this whole interview, and I'm super curious what golden nuggets you got out of there. Please put that in the comments so you can also tie some ideas in other people's minds who read them. And please don't forget to subscribe, because there's more interviews coming.